Hi everyone, this is Maria Clark at Sweet Willow Designs and welcome to my studio. Today I have another Mandala Dot painting for you. This is a really pretty one and I'm calling this one Winter White. So the materials we'll use are this chalky finish, titanium white. I have a 5x5 canvas that I've already primed and my tools. The first thing we need to do is to set our canvas up. This is a 5x5 canvas, so I go from corner to corner, of course, to make an X. And then measure at the 2.5 mark, or the halfway mark, for each side. And because this is a 5-inch canvas, I'll do it mark at 2.5 inches for each side. And then I will go and join those marks so that I have my grid on my canvas. I do have a pattern available for this project if you'd like to check it out. There's a link below in the description to my Etsy shop, or there's a link in the iCard, the little eye symbol in the top right hand corner. So let's get started with the titanium white. I'm using the L11 8mm crochet hook to just drop my center dot in, and that gives me the perfect starting point. The grid is really helpful, so I'm hoping that you're all putting at least a little bit of a grid on your canvas or substrate. Then I'm using the largest nail dotter to place 8 dots, one on each one of those grid lines. You know, I have a lot of questions about using color in my paintings, and I decided to go ahead and do an all-white one just to take color out of the mix and to take that pressure away. And it's winter, so it's perfect for this particular project. So we'll zoom in a little bit, and I'm going to be using the G6 4mm hook to put dots right in between the two previous dots on the previous row. And we'll go ahead and drop those in. The paint consistency that I'm using here is really, these Americana paints I just use pretty much straight out of the bottle, and they form a little bead on the end of the tool, and that's when you know that you have a nice consistency of paint. If it peaks, it's a little bit too thick, so you might want to thin it down. So using the smallest, I'm using the largest nail dotter in my set, but the small end, to put a little dot right in between there, just to give a little bit more interest and fill it in. And then I'm also using that same smaller end to place a reference dot right in the middle of my previous one, so I know how far and what distance to use. And then I'm using the J10 6mm crochet hook to drop a dot right above that, trying to keep always in sort of alignment with my grid marks, but if you go off alignment, don't worry about it. You can always sort of course correct a little bit as you move into your painting, and it's really hard to keep them exactly on grid, so don't worry too much about that. You can do a lot with corrections to even up the painting and make it a little bit more symmetrical. So now I'm using the largest dotter, and I'm just starting at the top, and I'm walking the dots around. And of course I go one side and do all of those, and I'm really speeding this up here so you can see it. But at any rate, go around, walk the dots around one side, and I'm turning the canvas each time, and then I will walk the dots around the other side. And for me, that's just an easier way to go about placing them, and it helps to keep my my hand out of the paint. Okay, we're back to our G6, our 4mm hook, and I will place a dot right there in between the two previous elements there. I'll just go all the way around with that. Now, I'm still with the G6 4mm, and what I'm doing here is I'm placing 2 dots on either side of that center dot that we made as we walk the dots around. I hope you can see that well. So I'm kind of moving up a little bit on the canvas and getting 2 dots there, and then you'll see how I connect all of those once they're on there. Try to get your spacing as even as possible, but you know it's really hard to do. You can see that mine's a little bit not completely same amount of spacing on each side, and that's okay. Don't worry about that, because you just adjust either the size of the tool that you're using or the number of dots that you place, and it'll look just fine. So I'm using one of my very fine nail dotters because I have that set of 5, so it goes down to a really narrow point. But you could also use a toothpick, and at one point in this I will actually convert to using the toothpick because I just thought that was a better size. If you make a mistake, just have your Q-tips handy and rub that out, let it dry, and then you can start dotting again. So I'm starting to connect a couple of dots by making just a row of pretty similarly sized dots. You can dip your paint in to the paint palette regularly. I usually only get about 2 dots before I have to dip it in again. And then the other thing that I wanted to mention to you is to be sure that as you're dotting, that you, especially when you're doing a lot of similar type size dots, that you are wiping your tool off very frequently, because as that paint builds up, it'll start to change the size of your dots. So you really want to make sure your tool is really clean. And we'll just go ahead and continue connecting those 2 dots. And it's forming a frame now, as you can see, around that central element there. And then I will place a dot in between that top 2. And then here's where you see me start to move out to the toothpick, and you can see how fine those dots are. I just thought that ended up being a better size, and I didn't worry about the fact that I changed it as I went along. Just keep going. Just keep going, and you'll be really pleased, I think, with the way your piece turns out. So see, sometimes I put 2, sometimes I put 3. It just depends on the spacing that I have. And you'll barely be able to notice it once you get a little bit of distance from your piece. So you can see how that's coming along. It's looking really pretty, and it's starting to form a nice pattern here. So I'm just using the toothpick now to go in and fill in any places where I think there's a little bit too much of a gap. And now I'm using the J10 6mm hook to go in and place a dot right in the center of those, or between those little frames that I created. And here's the last one. I'm using the G6 4mm again. Place a dot right above that previous row. And I will use my the largest ball stylus that I have, and I will walk 3 dots up on each one of those little spikes. Now I'm using my hairdryer to really make sure this is really pretty dry, because I'm going to start to draw on the canvas. And you know, one thing you can do is be sure that you're using your hairdryer to keep your canvas fairly dry, and that'll keep it a little bit neater. So I'm using my chalk pencil, and I'm drawing a little teardrop shape around that previous spike of dots that I put in there. And just freehanding it, I'm not using any kind of pattern, and then I'll continue on to the other side. Okay, now I'm going to be using the toothpick, and I'm going to be just following that chalk line around. That's the fun thing about doing these. You can also add elements, you know, just hand draw some elements on there as you like, and create your pattern that way, and then just walk or dot along that line. So I'm going to do that for each one of those little petals that I drew on there. And I went forward to the last section here, and I will fill in that last bit. One thing about using the toothpicks that I noticed is that because they're wood, they're fibrous and they absorb the paint. So I did have to change my toothpick out every now and again because it got little, I don't know, like splinters or whatever on the end of it, little fibers that released, and so I wanted to keep that toothpick fresh by changing it out. Now I'm using the G6 again, and that's the 4mm, and I'm going around and placing a dot at the top of each one of those petals. And I will use my largest ball stylus, the nail dotting tool, and I will walk dots around the side of each one of those petals to fill it out a little bit more. And I will speed this up. Okay, now we'll go around the other side. I really like the impact of using the white here. Okay, and we're just going to finish up that last one. Now I'm using the J10, the 6mm, and I'm going to drop a dot right in the bottom center of those petals. And now I'm going to make a little larger dot here with the L11 crochet hook. This is the 8mm. And I'll go right above that previous dot, still staying in the center. I hope you're enjoying this pattern. It definitely looks like winter to me. Now back to the G6, and I'm going to place these dots here. I start in the center, and I'm going to place 3 dots, but start with the center dot so you have a good orientation, and then place a dot on either side. Okay, and now I'm using the largest nail dotter in my set, but the small end, and I'm going to place some 3 little dots there. They're like little buds, and I will put one on each one of those 3 dots. Zoom in a little bit so you can see that a little bit better. And we'll just follow that all the way around. There you go. Those are the last ones there. So let's zoom out a little bit and you can take a look at the pattern. Now, you could start here. I'm going to put a little detail in each of the 4 corners and on each of the 4 sides. So I use the K 10.5, 6.5 millimeter to place a dot in each of the corners. And one thing I wanted to say about this, you need to leave a little bit of space because we're going to walk some dots around that one. So go up a little bit from the corner. Don't put it right on the corner. And now I'm using the largest ball stylus, and I'm going to walk my dots starting at the bottom, and I'm going to walk some dots up till I get to the center point, and then I'm going to go from the center point down and meet the other one. And see how it makes a sort of pretty design there? Kind of like a yin-yang type design. And I'll do that on each of the 4 corners. Okay, now I'm going to do the side element, and I'm going to use the G6, the 4 millimeter, to place a center dot. And again, you know, do as many of these elements as you like. If you liked it kind of without the corner pieces in these, that's perfectly good because I think it's a really pretty without those. And now I'm using the largest nail daughter to put 2 dots there. Actually, you'll notice that as I go through this that I add a 3rd one. I should have, just for balance, I think walked those out 3. But you'll see that I come back in. There's a little dot right above. And I'm really just trying to fill in and balance the piece. And now I'm adding that 3rd dot, which I could have done it, you know, the first time around. So I'll add that. And then I'll just go in and add another dot or so right above there. And again, I'm just looking for balance and what looks like good symmetry to me. You stop wherever it looks right for you. And we all dot different sizes, so you know your size may not be exactly like mine. Now, I didn't film this, but I did, and this is really hard to see, but I went back in with some pearl paint and just did top dots, and I will tell you that added just a lot of it was just really pretty because it had a little shimmery look. So here's the finished piece. And here's a little bit more of a close-up. Here's what it looks like on a stand. You can see how I oriented it in that pattern. And then I did one where I put blue top dots on. And here's how those two look together. I want to thank you for joining me in my studio today. I really hope you enjoyed this project. I really enjoyed bringing it to you. Thanks again for joining me in my studio. Take care.